There is something almost unbearable about not knowing where you stand with someone who once felt like home. The silence feels louder than any argument ever did. The absence feels heavier than the conflict. And somewhere in that quiet space between you and them, a question keeps looping in your mind. If they cared, why aren't they coming back? Here is the truth that stings and soothes at the same time. They might want you back. They might miss you more than their pride will ever allow them to admit. They might replay your last conversation in their head at night. They might feel the emptiness in the same way you do. But they are waiting for something, waiting for you to do something first. That is the part no one says out loud. When an avoidant pulls away, it rarely means they stopped feeling. It usually means they felt too much. Intimacy rose to a level that triggered their nervous system. Vulnerability knocked on a door they've spent years reinforcing with emotional locks. And instead of leaning in, they retreated. Not because you were too much, not because you were unworthy, but because closeness felt like a loss of control. You see, when someone carries an avoidant attachment style, connection and danger are wired too closely together. Love does not feel soft and safe. It feels exposing. It feels like standing emotionally naked under bright lights with no shield. And so when things deepen, when affection becomes real, when expectations start forming, their body interprets that intensity as a threat. The instinct is not to hold tighter, it is to create distance. But distance does not erase attachment, it only buries it under ego and self-protection. This is where you are now, standing in the aftermath of their silence, wondering if you should reach out, wondering if they are waiting, wondering if your pride is costing you something that could still be saved. They rarely make the first move after a separation, and that has less to do with not caring and more to do with fear. Reaching out would mean acknowledging they miss you. It would mean admitting they were affected. It would mean stepping into vulnerability without knowing how you will respond. For someone who equates vulnerability with weakness, that risk feels unbearable. So instead they tell themselves a story. If you really cared, you would message first. If you still want them, you would break the silence. If the connection was real, you would fight for it. Notice how this shifts responsibility away from them. Notice how it protects their ego. They get to remain emotionally guarded while still hoping for reconciliation. They get to feel desired without exposing themselves to rejection. It looks like indifference from the outside, but internally, it is a battle between pride and longing. There is something called the ego shield. It forms quietly over years of emotional self-sufficiency. Maybe they learned early in life that relying on others led to disappointment. Maybe they were praised for independence but never taught how to express need. Maybe vulnerability was met with criticism instead of comfort. Over time, they built an identity around not needing anyone. And then you came along. You disrupted that identity. You made them feel seen in ways they weren't prepared for. You touched emotional layers they normally keep hidden. And that kind of closeness feels intoxicating at first. They lean in, they open up more than usual, they feel connected. But as intimacy increases, the ego shield activates. It whispers, "This is too much, you're losing control, pull back." So they do. They start responding slower. They become less expressive. They rationalize the connection. They focus on your flaws. They convince themselves they need space, and eventually they create enough distance to breathe again. But breathing alone is not the same as being fulfilled. After the space phase begins, something interesting happens. At first, they feel relief. The pressure of closeness is gone. The expectations feel lighter. Their nervous system calms down. They tell themselves they made the right decision. But relief is temporary. Silence stretches, nights grow longer, the distractions lose their effectiveness, and slowly the absence of you starts to echo. They remember the way you listened, the way you understood them without forcing them to explain every emotion, the comfort of your presence, the warmth of your consistency, and now there is a void where that used to be. This is the part most people never see, because avoidants do not broadcast their internal conflict. They process alone. They think alone, they miss you alone, and here is where your behavior becomes pivotal. If you chase them during this stage, you confirm their fear, intensity returns, pressure returns, they feel engulfed again. But if you pull back completely, something shifts inside them. The control they thought they had disappears. They start wondering if you are moving on, if you are detaching, if you are no longer available. The silence that once felt safe now feels threatening. When you stop chasing, their mind begins filling in the gaps. They check your social media. They reread old messages. They wonder who else has your attention. They analyze your last conversation for clues. They might not reach out, but they are watching. This quiet observation is not random. It is a way of reconnecting without vulnerability. They get to feel close without exposing themselves. They get to monitor the situation without risking rejection. But beneath all of this observation lies one expectation. They are waiting for you to do something first. They want reassurance without asking for it. They want confirmation that you still care. They want to feel chosen again, but without stepping into emotional risk. They want a message that says, "I'm still here. I understand you. I'm not angry. I'm open." Not because they are manipulative in a calculated way, but because they are emotionally self-protective. Reaching out would mean saying, "I miss you." It would mean lowering the shield. It would mean allowing you to see their need, and for someone who built their identity on independence, that feels like surrender. So they wait. They justify their waiting with pride. They tell themselves, "You should apologize. You should fix it. You should prove your love." And if you do, they will respond. If you initiate, they will soften. If you bridge the gap, they might meet you halfway. But what they rarely admit is that they are hoping your silence is temporary, hoping you still feel the same, hoping you will validate the connection so they do not have to expose their longing. And this creates a painful dynamic, because you are also waiting, you are also hoping, you are also protecting your heart. Two people missing each other, two people afraid to move first, two egos standing guard over hearts that still care. It is important to understand that when an avoidant withdraws, it is not always about you. It is about the internal alarm that closeness triggers inside them. Intimacy activates fears of losing autonomy. Vulnerability activates fears of being seen as weak. Dependence activates fears of eventual abandonment. So they pull away before they can be left. They detach before they can be hurt. They create distance before they can be exposed. But detachment does not cancel attachment. It only suppresses it. If you are feeling the ache of their silence, know this. It is very possible they are feeling it too. They just express it differently. Where you feel urgency to talk, they feel urgency to hide. Where you feel a desire to clarify, they feel a desire to control. And control feels safer than love to them. Now you stand at a crossroads. Part of you wants to reach out and end the tension. Part of you wants to maintain your dignity. Part of you fears that if you do nothing, you will lose them forever. The question is not simply whether they want you back. The deeper question is whether the dynamic can change. Because if you are the only one breaking silence, if you are the only one lowering your guard, if you are the only one carrying the emotional risk, then reconciliation will look exactly like the past. You chasing, they retreating, you proving, they testing. Understanding their expectation gives you power, not to manipulate, not to play games, but to make a conscious decision. If you choose to reach out, let it come from grounded confidence, not desperation. If you choose to remain silent, let it come from self-respect, not ego. Because what truly shifts an avoidant is not pursuit, it is emotional stability. When they sense that you are no longer trying to control the outcome, when they feel that you are secure with or without them, something inside them relaxes, the pressure disappears, the fear softens, and sometimes that is when they finally find the courage to step forward. But do not confuse their waiting with power. It is protection. Do not confuse their silence with indifference. It is fear. Do not confuse their pride with strength. It is armor. And the deeper truth is this: they may want you back. They may be expecting you to reach out first. They may be hoping you will close the gap so they do not have to risk rejection. But love cannot thrive where vulnerability is one-sided. As you move through this silence, ask yourself something deeper than whether they miss you. Ask whether you are willing to return to a dynamic that requires you to always move first. Ask whether the version of you that is growing right now deserves mutual effort. Because sometimes the most powerful move is not breaking the silence. Sometimes it is allowing them to confront their own. And if they truly want you back, eventually the fear of losing you will become stronger than the fear of vulnerability. That is when the ego shield cracks. That is when pride bends. That is when their silence turns into action. Until then, your strength is in your stillness. Your power is in your emotional regulation, and your worth is not defined by who reaches out first. You are not chasing, you are choosing. And that choice changes everything. When the silence stretches long enough, a subtle shift begins inside them. What once felt safe now feels empty. The distance that protected them from their own emotions suddenly leaves them exposed to the quiet ache of your absence. They start to remember the way your presence made the world softer, the way your voice could calm the storm inside them, the way your smile once made their defenses relax. And with every memory, a pang grows that they rarely, if ever, admit out loud. They watch from a distance, often without intention, as if observing quietly could bridge the gap without risking exposure. Social media, mutual friends, the tiniest hints of your life, they become their private evidence that you are still real, still alive in their world. But it is not just curiosity, it is longing. It is the kind of ache that cannot be fully named, because naming it would mean admitting vulnerability, and admitting vulnerability feels like losing control. They may find themselves replaying old conversations in their mind, analyzing every word, every pause, every glance. They ask themselves questions they cannot voice. Did they really mean that? Did they notice me when I needed them? Did they care in the way I secretly hoped they would? And when they cannot find answers, anxiety creeps in, not about you, but about the parts of themselves they cannot yet face. The irony is sharp. They want reassurance, yet fear any step that might lead to it. They want to reconnect, yet recoil from the very act that would make that possible. It is a delicate balance, a silent tug-of-war between desire and fear. And this is where most people misinterpret their behavior. They see distance and assume indifference. They see inaction and assume detachment. They fail to notice the invisible struggle raging inside, the desperate, quiet wish to feel close again, restrained by layers of self-protection. And that is why what they truly expect from you is rarely what you expect from them. They are waiting not for an apology. They are waiting not for a dramatic confession. They are waiting for a gesture that signals understanding, patience, and emotional steadiness. A simple, grounded connection that tells them you are still present, still there, still capable of love without neediness. This expectation can feel cruel because it seems like the power is in your hands, and in a way it is, but the power they secretly crave is not control over you, it is control over their own emotional exposure. If they can rely on you to meet them halfway, without demanding they step fully into vulnerability, it feels safe enough to consider coming back. It feels safe enough to test the waters of reconnection without drowning in the fear that closeness always brings. Yet many people misstep here. They flood with emotion, overwhelm with messages, chase, plead, or even over-explain. Each of these actions, while understandable, often reinforces the pattern that keeps them at bay. Instead of pulling closer, you push them farther away because intensity triggers the very fear they are trying to manage. Emotional overdrive feels unsafe to someone whose nervous system equates closeness with danger. The true art lies in stillness and measured communication. When you maintain your emotional ground, when you hold your worth without trying to prove it, when you respect your own boundaries while acknowledging theirs, something shifts. They feel the magnetic pull of security. They feel the intrigue of stability. They sense a connection that no longer threatens, no longer demands, no longer floods their system. And then the subtle shift begins. They start imagining scenarios where you could be together again without the frantic chase, without the pressure, without the risk that used to terrify them. They wonder how it would feel to reach out, to speak, to step toward you in a small, cautious way. The idea that connection can be safe slowly seeps into their consciousness. But before they act, there is hesitation. Before any step is taken, there is an internal dialogue filled with doubt. What if they misinterpret me? What if I lose control again? What if my own fear sabotages the moment, and every pause is a test, not of you but of themselves? They are gauging whether they can trust the vulnerability without fearing destruction. This is where understanding their psychology becomes crucial for you. It is not about manipulation. It is not about playing games. It is about awareness. You are witnessing a person caught between longing and fear, between pride and vulnerability, between love and the instinct to self-protect. And recognizing this allows you to make conscious choices about your own behavior, choices that preserve your dignity while gently encouraging reconnection. Here is the deeper truth. They want to see that you are secure, capable of love, and not dependent on their validation. They want to know that you are emotionally present, yet not desperate. They want to feel that connection is possible without you sacrificing your own stability. That is the bridge they hope you will build, and when you do, they may find themselves slowly moving across it. But even as they begin to imagine reaching out, the fear is still there. Fear whispers that closeness will bring pain, that vulnerability will lead to exposure, that desire will demand something they are not ready to give. And yet, longing persists. It creates a tension that feels almost unbearable, the pull toward connection versus the instinct to retreat. You can feel this tension in your own body as well. Every unanswered message, every delayed response, every subtle sign of hesitation stirs your heart. It amplifies the uncertainty, the fear, the longing, and that is why the emotional attachment in this stage is so intense. You are not just processing their absence, you are processing the gap between your expectations and their capacity. You are processing the ache of wanting someone who is simultaneously near and far, present and distant. At this point, many people make the critical mistake of trying to force resolution. They push harder, speak louder, offer more than they should, but emotional pressure rarely bends an avoidant. Instead, the key is quiet strength, the kind of presence that communicates without words, that you are here, that you are steady, and that you are not willing to compromise your own emotional health for temporary connection. Because what truly draws an avoidant back is not pleading or chasing. It is security. It is the confidence to exist fully without needing to manipulate or overcompensate. It is the demonstration that love does not always require surrendering yourself to fear. And when they sense this, their internal armor begins to crack, just enough to wonder what it would feel like to come closer. Even then, they will hesitate. Every inch toward you is accompanied by questions, doubts, and internal negotiation. But with patience, consistency, and emotional grounding on your part, the tension begins to shift. They start believing that closeness no longer equals danger. They start believing that love can exist without losing themselves, and gradually, step by step, the pull toward reconnection strengthens. It is a slow process, often invisible to the outside world, yet profoundly real. It is a journey of internal negotiation, quiet hope, and cautious curiosity. And if you can maintain your own emotional clarity while honoring this process, you may witness the moment when they finally reach a point where the fear is outweighed by longing and the silence finally breaks. Because in the end, when they want you back, it is never about manipulation or control. It is about the delicate interplay between desire and fear, the careful dance of vulnerability and protection, the quiet hope that someone will meet them where they are, without demanding more than they can give. And when they see that you are willing to stand in your own power, without collapsing under uncertainty, it opens the door they once thought too risky to cross. They are waiting for you to do something first, not to beg, not to chase, but to show that connection can exist without threat, that love can exist without chaos, that reconciliation can be safe enough to step into. And that is the hidden key to why they may want you back more than you realize, even if pride keeps them silent for now. Even as they linger in hesitation, even as fear keeps them frozen in place, there is a part of them that cannot stop imagining you, that cannot stop replaying the comfort you brought, that cannot stop craving the stability and warmth that your presence once gave them. They remember how effortlessly you seemed to understand them without forcing explanations. They remember the moments of quiet connection, where words weren't necessary because hearts were in sync. Those memories haunt them in the best possible way. They are reminders of what they miss and proof of what they are resisting. This is where the inner conflict is most palpable. They want to reach out, to bridge the gap, to restore what once felt easy, but fear whispers louder than longing. Fear tells them that closeness means vulnerability. Vulnerability means exposure, and exposure could mean loss. Their mind invents scenarios to justify inaction. Perhaps you have moved on, perhaps you are angry, perhaps reaching out is too risky, and they cannot bear the thought of rejection or emotional collapse, and so the silence continues. Yet even in this silence, subtle signs begin to emerge. They may watch your social media activity, not to manipulate, but to feel tethered to your world. They notice little things, your routines, your habits, the people you interact with. They catalogue every detail, often unconsciously, as a way of remaining emotionally connected without overtly exposing themselves. This quiet attention is an emotional lifeline. It allows them to feel close, yet protected. And inside, it stirs a slow building tension, the ache of wanting versus the fear of stepping forward. It is in this space, the waiting, the observing, the imagining, that they begin to test themselves. They ask questions silently. Can I handle this closeness now? Can I risk it without losing myself? Can I confront the parts of me that fear love, fear need, fear being seen? Every imagined scenario is a rehearsal for courage. Every hesitation is a negotiation with their own internal boundaries. And every small recognition of your stability, your calm, your grounded presence nudges them closer to the idea that connection might not be as threatening as they feared. Now consider this. They do not want you to chase them. They do not want dramatic declarations or emotional flooding. What they desire is quiet, steady, emotionally regulated interaction. They want reassurance that the connection still exists, that you are still capable of care without forcing them to take the first step in vulnerability. They are hoping that you will demonstrate a love that is stable, consistent, and non-threatening, because that is the love that finally allows them to step out of hiding. And this is where most people misunderstand the dynamic. It is easy to think that silence equals indifference, that distance equals a lack of interest, that inaction equals absence. But the truth is far more complex. They are not indifferent. They are deeply conflicted. They are not absent. They are observing, processing, and wrestling with emotions they have spent years suppressing. Their apparent inaction is not a lack of desire. It is an effort to manage the intensity of what they feel without collapsing under it. This internal struggle creates a powerful tension in your relationship. You are caught between longing and hesitation, uncertainty and hope, frustration and care. Every day of silence amplifies your emotions because you are not just missing them, you are missing the version of the connection that felt effortless, safe and validating. And in that absence, your own heart becomes a mirror of their struggle. You crave, you hesitate, you fear rejection, and yet you hope. Understanding this dynamic is crucial because it gives you insight into why they are expecting you to do something first. It is not about control in a manipulative sense. It is about reassurance that the connection can exist safely. It is about knowing that you are steady, that you are grounded, that you are not emotionally desperate, and that love does not require them to surrender their emotional armor entirely before taking a risk. When you grasp this, you realize the subtle but profound truth. The avoidant wants to come back, but they cannot do so safely unless they feel secure enough to do it. They are waiting for you to model that security. They are waiting for you to demonstrate that love does not always demand compromise of self. They are waiting for a cue that stepping forward will not result in emotional chaos. And that cue often comes from your own calm, confident, emotionally regulated behavior. But the journey is not linear. Even when they sense that it might be safe to reconnect, they hesitate. Every small move toward you is accompanied by internal dialogue filled with doubt, rehearsals of potential scenarios, and imagined consequences. Fear still whispers, what if this time is different? What if I am hurt again? What if vulnerability destroys me? And every cautious approach is followed by a pause, a silent negotiation between desire and caution, longing and fear, pride and surrender. Meanwhile, they begin to internalize your stability without knowing it. They notice your emotional consistency, your ability to exist fully without chasing, your refusal to allow uncertainty to destabilize your self-worth. And slowly, imperceptibly, it changes the way they view the connection. They begin to imagine stepping closer. They begin to rehearse words in their mind. They begin to wonder if it is possible to experience closeness without panic, and the tension between longing and fear shifts slightly, enough to create a window for potential reconnection. Here is another layer most people miss. The way you manage your own emotional response during this waiting period determines whether the connection has the potential to rekindle in a healthy way. If you collapse under the uncertainty, if you chase, if you plead, you reinforce the pattern they have been running from. But if you remain grounded, confident, and emotionally regulated, you model the kind of connection they crave but rarely know how to engage in. You become a living example of stability and care, a safe harbor that contrasts sharply with the chaos their internal fear often produces. At this point, the pull toward reconnection becomes stronger. The desire to reach out, to test the waters, to feel close again, begins to override the instinct to retreat. They imagine moments of quiet connection, small gestures that signal care without overwhelming intensity. They envision conversations that feel safe, interactions that do not demand emotional surrender, and proximity that allows them to exist fully without fear of collapse. And even if they do not reach out immediately, this internal rehearsal strengthens their longing, deepens their emotional investment, and primes them for eventual action. Yet hesitation persists. Even as desire intensifies, fear remains a constant companion. Fear of rejection, fear of exposure, fear of losing control, and every imagined scenario is filtered through this lens. Will reaching out change the balance? Will it demand more than I can give? Will it destabilize the fragile sense of self I have worked so hard to protect? And while this negotiation is silent and invisible, it is relentless. Your role, then, is not to fix or manipulate this process. Your role is to honor your own boundaries while modeling stability, consistency, and emotional regulation. Your role is to demonstrate that love does not require collapse, that connection can be safe, and that mutual care does not demand forfeiting yourself. When they see this, the internal armor begins to soften, just enough to imagine a bridge back toward you. And in that softening, the first glimmers of hope emerge. They start to recognize that reaching out might not be as dangerous as they imagined. They consider tentative steps, an unspoken message, a careful approach, a small gesture of engagement. And while fear still whispers, longing now competes with it, creating a tension that can no longer be ignored. Because at the core of this dynamic is a fundamental truth. They want you back. They want the connection, the comfort, the understanding, the safety that your presence once provided. They may not say it aloud, they may not act immediately, and pride may hold them in check, but the desire is real, persistent, and growing, and they are hoping you will do the one thing that allows them to feel safe enough to act, demonstrate emotional stability without chasing, care without demand, and patience without collapse. When they finally sense this, the tension reaches a point where the fear of loss outweighs the fear of vulnerability. Pride gives way to longing. Silence begins to feel unbearable, and for the first time in a long while, they imagine stepping across the invisible line that separates them from you. They imagine reconnecting not from desperation, but from a cautious curiosity nurtured by their observation of your grounded presence. At this stage, the process is delicate. Every interaction matters. Every display of patience, confidence, and stability reinforces their growing trust. Every emotional outburst or desperate plea threatens to push them back into retreat. The dynamic is a careful dance between desire and fear, longing and hesitation, pride and vulnerability. And when approached with awareness, emotional regulation, and self-respect, the dance slowly, imperceptibly, opens the door to reconnection. The hidden reality is this: they want to come back, but only when it feels safe enough. They are waiting for cues that the connection is secure, that love does not demand collapse, that vulnerability is manageable, and that you will remain grounded regardless of their pace. And when they finally recognize this, when longing outweighs fear, when desire overrides hesitation, the silence that once separated you begins to crumble. Because love cannot thrive where fear dominates, but it can survive quietly, persistently, beneath layers of armor until the right conditions emerge. And those conditions are created not by chasing, pleading, or over-explaining, but by modeling groundedness, patience, and the unwavering belief that connection can exist without chaos. By the time they reach the point where desire begins to overpower fear, a subtle transformation has occurred inside them. The walls they built to protect themselves are still there, but cracks have formed. The armor that once felt impenetrable now allows glimpses of longing to escape. Every memory of your presence, every quiet observation, every imagined moment of connection has chipped away at the fear that kept them distant. And within those cracks, hope begins to grow. Even as they wrestle with pride and fear, they start to acknowledge an uncomfortable truth. The connection with you is unique, rare, and deeply meaningful. They recognize that what they lost or allowed to drift away is not easily replaced. They notice the absence of your understanding, your patience, your steady emotional presence, and with that recognition comes a growing tension, the desire to reconnect versus the fear of losing control. It is a tension that has no easy resolution, but one that slowly directs their focus inward, toward their own readiness to act. This is where the final layer of expectation emerges. They are not simply waiting for you to reach out, they are waiting for you to demonstrate that your connection is a place of safety and stability. They need to feel that love can exist without drama, without collapse, without surrendering the self they have spent a lifetime protecting. And when they sense that you can provide this without compromise, without chase, without emotional desperation, it becomes the invitation they have been waiting for. Patience, in this moment, becomes your superpower. It is not passive, it is active and intentional. It is a demonstration that you can love without needing validation, that you can care without collapsing, that you can exist fully without letting their hesitation dictate your value. And when they perceive this strength, it changes the entire dynamic. The silent longing that once remained trapped behind fear now begins to feel safe enough to emerge. They may test this stability in small ways, perhaps a subtle message, a careful approach, a moment of tentative contact. Each gesture is measured, cautious, and deliberate, not reckless, not overwhelming. And with every small step they take, the tension between longing and fear shifts further toward action. They are experimenting with the possibility that connection is safe, that love is sustainable, that emotional closeness does not have to mean surrender. It is crucial to understand that this testing is not manipulation, it is self-preservation. They are negotiating with their own nervous system, gauging the limits of safety and rehearsing vulnerability in increments that feel manageable. Your role is to honor this process, to respond with consistency, patience, and emotional clarity rather than react impulsively, demand engagement, or overcompensate for the silence. Every reaction from you either reinforces safety or reawakens fear. As they inch closer, the internal dialogue intensifies. They replay old arguments, reconsider past misunderstandings, and reflect on moments where connection felt effortless. They imagine how interactions could unfold now. With you emotionally grounded and consistent, they rehearse conversations that could be safe, envision gestures that feel non-threatening, and weigh the potential outcomes of taking a step forward. And in these moments of internal rehearsal, the possibility of reconnection strengthens. Meanwhile, your own emotional state becomes the unseen bridge between them and the connection they desire. Every moment of calm, every demonstration of patience, every display of self-respect signals to them that closeness no longer equates to danger. Your stillness communicates what words cannot, that love can exist without desperation, that connection can exist without compromise, and that being present does not require them to relinquish control. This realization is profound because it bypasses the need for explicit conversation. They begin to feel the connection in the energy you radiate rather than in the words you speak. They sense the stability, the safety and the grounding that allows them to imagine being close again without panic. And for someone who has spent a lifetime guarding against emotional exposure, this is more persuasive than any plea, promise or declaration could ever be. But the journey is not complete yet. Even as they sense safety, even as longing begins to eclipse fear, they hesitate. Pride remains a strong undercurrent. Habitual patterns of retreat still whisper in their mind. Old fears resurface unexpectedly, reminding them of the risks they once associated with closeness. And at this point, patience on your part is not just a strategy, it is an emotional lifeline. Your consistency offers a counterpoint to the fear that still lingers, reinforcing the possibility that love can now be approached differently. Then comes the delicate moment when internal resistance meets external reality. Perhaps they send a brief, tentative message. Perhaps they test the waters with small gestures. Perhaps they allow themselves to linger in your presence without withdrawing immediately. Each action, however minor, is monumental. It represents a crack in the armor, a rehearsal for vulnerability, a subtle acknowledgement that longing has begun to outweigh fear. And as they engage in this cautious way, it opens the door to deeper reconnection. At this stage, you may notice subtle changes in their behavior. They respond more attentively, engage more consistently, and allow themselves to be present without retreating as quickly. These shifts are not guarantees of permanence, but they are indicators that your emotional steadiness has created an environment in which reconnection is possible. They are learning that intimacy can exist without chaos, and in that learning, the foundation for healthier dynamics is quietly being laid. The moment they truly step forward is transformative. It is not about urgency or dramatic gestures. It is about a cautious, intentional choice to engage despite fear. Pride may still linger, but longing finally gains the upper hand. They take the first authentic step across the emotional gap, guided by the knowledge that connection no longer threatens their sense of self. And in this moment, the dynamic shifts from silent longing to active engagement. Yet it is critical to recognize that their journey toward you does not absolve you of your own boundaries or emotional integrity. Reconnection is only sustainable when both sides approach it with awareness, patience, and mutual respect. Your power lies in your ability to remain grounded, emotionally regulated, and consistent, qualities that both reassure them and safeguard your own well-being. The balance of desire and fear must now be met with the balance of love and self-respect. As they continue to test the waters, every interaction becomes a subtle negotiation. They may retreat occasionally, hesitate, or reassess, and each time your calm and consistent response reinforces safety, strengthens trust, and deepens the emotional bond. The connection evolves from fear-driven patterns to deliberate, conscious engagement, where love is expressed without panic, desire is acknowledged without desperation, and closeness is approached with measured courage. Eventually, they arrive at a point where fear no longer dominates, pride yields to longing, anxiety gives way to curiosity, hesitation transforms into willingness, and the silence that once separated you dissolves, replaced by genuine engagement, honest communication, and the possibility of a deeper, more secure bond. They may not have come back in the way you imagined, but they have arrived in the place where authentic reconnection is possible. The final truth is this: when someone with avoidant tendencies wants you back, it is rarely simple or linear. It is a journey that begins in silence, progresses through observation, and moves slowly toward tentative engagement. Their desire is often hidden beneath layers of fear, pride, and self-protection. They are waiting for you to demonstrate security, patience, and emotional regulation, proof that connection can exist safely. And when you provide this, the door to reconnection opens. Your role in this process is not to chase, plead, or manipulate. It is to embody stability, to honor your own boundaries, and to model the kind of emotional presence they secretly crave. Your groundedness becomes the bridge that allows them to step across the gap they have been guarding so fiercely. And when they finally do, the connection that emerges is not just about desire, it is about trust, safety, and the possibility of love, approached differently, with awareness, care, and respect for both hearts involved. The path to reconnection with someone avoidant is never about urgency. It is about timing, patience, and emotional alignment. They may expect you to do something first, but what they truly need is evidence that love does not demand surrender. They need proof that intimacy can be safe, that vulnerability can coexist with self-preservation, and that connection does not require collapse. And when they witness this in you, they begin to step forward, not from manipulation or ego, but from genuine longing tempered by courage. And finally, Remember this, you are not responsible for fixing their fear. You are not responsible for accelerating their pace. Your responsibility is to remain steady, present, and emotionally aligned with your own truth. In doing so, you create the conditions under which they can choose to return authentically, without coercion, and with a willingness to engage in love that is conscious, balanced, and deeply resonant. When they do come back, it will be a testament to the power of stillness, patience, and emotional clarity. It will be a moment that proves longing can exist alongside fear, that connection can survive distance, and that love, when approached with awareness and respect, can overcome the walls we build to protect ourselves. And in that moment, both hearts emerge stronger, more conscious, and more capable of sustaining the kind of bond that once felt impossible. Because in the end, the avoidant may want you back, and they may be expecting you to do something first, but the real key is not the action itself. It is the demonstration of unwavering emotional presence, the modeling of security and self-respect, and the creation of a space where love can exist without fear. And when you embody this truth, you give them the courage to step forward and to finally meet you on the other side of silence.